Good morning. How's everybody feeling today? Man, I'm excited to see you guys, excited for all of our Bridgepoint family watching online. Can we just give it up for our Bridgepoint family online this morning? So thankful that you guys are joining us. I am excited because today we're continuing in our series called This Is My Story. But before we jump in, there's a couple things I just want to make you aware of that are going on around Bridgepoint. First, you see me modeling our Bridgepoint tee this morning, and I know it looks good. You got to get the good models out for these things. And you've probably seen them in the lobby with our hats and cups the last few weeks. They're only going to be out there this Sunday and next Sunday, and after that, they're going in the vault. And so if you've been thinking about getting one, grab one today or next Sunday. And then there's only a couple weeks left of summer break, which means all the parents are excited. We're getting the kids back in school and out of the house. And along with that, at church, we enter into one of my favorite seasons every year. It's 21 days of prayer. And if you've been checking Bridgepoint out, there's something you got to know is that we believe in the power of prayer. And so we take the first 3 weeks of the school year and we do 21 days of prayer. It's 6 a.m. prayer services Monday through Friday here in the auditorium, and then 10 a.m. on Saturday. And of course, we have prayer during service on Sunday. And I know what some of you are thinking, 6 a.m. is kind of early. Yes, it is. We're going to give God our first. And then you're also thinking, I don't know if I can pray, like a whole prayer service. That seems a little daunting. Listen, we make it so easy. There's a time of worship. There's a devotional teaching. We have prayer guides that walk you through exactly how to pray different prayers from Scripture. We even are going to have kids' prayer guides this year because I know a lot of us bring our kids to participate as well. You do not want to miss. My challenge to you is just come that first Monday. It'll be Monday, August 9th. Come that first Monday, and I promise you're going to see God show up and begin to work powerfully in your life. Now, we're going to kick things off with our day one on Sunday, August 8th, by having a big celebration here at Bridgepoint. And so on that Sunday, we're going to have inflatables. We've got a dunk tank. I'm trying to get the student director in that dunk tank. We got a petting zoo. We'll have Kona ice. It's going to be a fantastic celebration after both services. So if you have some friends or family members that you've been thinking about inviting to come to church, that will be a fantastic day to bring them along. But enough about that. Today, I am so pumped because you get to hear from three amazing people who serve on our communication team here at Bridgepoint. So would you give a warm welcome to Adam Michalski, Julia Geiger, and Allie Finnegan. How you guys doing?
Doing good. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm not teaching. I'm doing great. I'm relaxed this morning. Well, these are three of the most incredible people I get the honor of serving alongside. They're on our communication team. So some of you are thinking, they look familiar to me. That's because they're out here every Sunday guiding us through different moments in the service. But they're going to get a chance to share their stories with you this morning. And here's what I want to challenge you with. They have three very different stories. But I promise that each one of us is going to relate to different things in their story. And so as they're sharing with us, just be aware of how God might be moving and speaking to you in your own life about your own story as they share with us. So we're going to kick things off with Mr. Adam Michalski. So I know there may be some people here who don't know you. They haven't had a chance to meet you yet. So why don't you introduce yourself?
Well, hello, everyone. My name is Adam Michelski. I am married to my beautiful wife, Katie. We have two beautiful girls. Avery is 7 and Charlie is 5. And y'all, a little side note here. My heart just got so warm when we were sitting there worshiping, looking over to my beautiful girls, and they're just singing every word. Like, Katie, we're doing something right.
That's awesome.
But we've been going to Bridgepoint for about almost 3 years, and Katie and I have been married for 11 years. I know everyone's like, man, they are young. We're like 14 when they got married. Pretty much. And this is why I stay dressed this way, because I can control that.
That's awesome. So talk a little bit about your spiritual journey, because I think your story is very different than mine in a really good way. Talk about what your spiritual journey growing up was like.
Yeah, so honestly, I kind of had to figure everything out to the point where I'm sitting right now on my own for a long time. I was raised in a home that wasn't filled with faith. We didn't go to church. My mom and dad, they had a pretty rough relationship. My mom battled really severe depression, and I kind of took on all the weight of that and the weight of their relationship on my shoulders. Just took responsibility that I probably shouldn't have at a very young age to just make sure that they're staying together and making sure everything's okay. As far as faith goes, my mom and I would go to a Catholic church every once in a while. We would go through the motions there. I really didn't have a relationship with Jesus. I didn't know it was a thing that you could do, is have a relationship and a closeness with Jesus. I got baptized when I was a baby. I made my first communion, really went through the steps of the Catholic faith. Other than that, I said the prayers we learned that Sunday, and then that's pretty much where it ended. When we left those doors, my mom and I wouldn't really speak about God or faith, and my dad and I definitely didn't. We didn't have a close relationship growing up. Definitely didn't have a spiritual mentor in my life. So I really tried to figure it out and just kind of rolled with what I was dealt at the time. And I knew I wanted to go to heaven one day, so I made sure to say my prayers and wanted to go to church with Mama.
It's so fascinating to me because you have a couple different dynamics going on. On one hand, you don't have any kind of spiritual grounding, but then along with that, you have a lot of weight and responsibility to be put on a kid to care for his parents and their relationship. And so how'd you handle all that?
Well, I try to handle it on my own, which, as we all know, it's never really great. I really just I wanted to just forget about it, honestly. I'd be home and take care of things and try and figure it out. And just when I left home, didn't want to think about it. Didn't know what to do, what my calling was. Really didn't know what I was passionate in. So I honestly just kind of lived a life of just numbing it. Didn't want to think about it. Didn't want to try and figure out those hard questions, the answers to those hard questions. So that led to a life of me just pursuing drugs and alcohol and hanging out with. I always had a lot of friends, but definitely was not close to them. All we lived for was just Friday night. So we tried to get to Friday and let's hang out and let's have a good time. And we never talked about Jesus, didn't share faith, didn't really know what was going on in each other's lives. It was just very surface level, living for the world. And that really just kind of carried me all the way through high school and into college. And I started going to Valdosta State University, and Katie and I actually started hanging out there because her sister went to Valdosta at the time. And we just started dating and became really close, and I ended up moving back here. You know, once you find the one, you got to make it work. So I came back to Georgia, or this way on Georgia, and then Katie and I just started dating pretty seriously, and we got married when I was 20 and she was 22. And then pretty much our first 5 years of marriage, we still lived for the world. We wanted to have a good time, and we worked super hard in our careers at the time, and we just wanted to, by Friday, we wanted to just let off some steam and have a good time. We got our first house pretty young, and that was the party house. Everybody came over. Everyone was still pretty young as far as our friends. We were like one of the first ones to get married, and we lived for the world at the time. And
so at this point, you've been married 5 years, you're still kind of pursuing the party life and just not really developing deep community or friendships, not really pursuing things of God. What is it that caused something to switch in you?
So really, as Katie and I got married, when we were married, about 5 years into our marriage, we just kind of both sat down and were like, all right, it's time we want to start to have a family. We want to start to make sure we're building a strong foundation for our family. And it was super important for both of us to just lead our family in the church and raise our family in the church. And we were about to have Avery at the time, and we just wanted to make sure that we raised our kids in the church. Didn't know what that looked like because neither of us experienced that growing up. So we were just on agreement that we're going to figure it out together. So we started actually going to a Baptist church at the time. With me growing up in a Catholic church, Katie had to do a lot more steps to get there for us to go there. So we were both like, all right, that's too much. Let's just do this Baptist church thing. So we started going there, and just every Sunday, both her and I would just feel something. We didn't know what it was, but we could just feel something stirring inside of us. Worshiping, we just always felt some emotions. We didn't know what it was, but we wanted more. So we continued to come back each and every Sunday. And then one Sunday during worship, Katie just lost it. She just broke down. She was a hot mess. I'm like, Katie, what is going on with you? But we had a friend there at the church, and she immediately came over to Katie, and she prayed over her, and Katie gave her life to Jesus in that moment.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and she got baptized the next Sunday. So really, that's where I kind of say my spiritual journey began. So from that point forward, I just really pressed into prayer. My only prayer was, God, what can I do to show you how much I love you? Is this something I need to do? Should I get baptized? Should I surrender my life to you? Whatever that means, is that something I should do? And that was all that I prayed for the next few months. And then one morning on the way to work, I was just listening to worship song, praying that same prayer. And then Toby Mac's Speak Life came on, throwback. But I don't know what it was, but the words he was saying, just speak life, and I just felt hit. I just lost it. I just started weeping, and I just got chill bumps everywhere. And right after praying that prayer, that song came on, and that happened. And I'm like, God, this is my answer. This is the first time in my life I felt clear of anything, really, besides marrying Katie, of course. But that was the only time I heard from God, I felt like. In that moment, I'm like, okay, this can happen for me. This is my answer. This is what I've been praying for. And I literally pulled up to work. 5 minutes later, my pastor at the time called, and he just said, hey, just checking in on you. He knew I've been praying through these prayers and just kind of didn't really know what I'm doing at this point in life. And I said, I need to come see you after work today. And so I left and went right to his office. He prayed over me, and I surrendered my life to Jesus that day.
That's so awesome, dude. Man, talk about, so you've gone through this journey, you've given your life to Jesus, so life was great after that, right? Like everything went perfect, you never had any problems. Like, talk about what has life been like after making that decision to follow Jesus?
So really in that moment, life did seem perfect. I felt like I got my answer. I felt like I had a purpose. I had a calling. God has a plan for me. Me that did all that messed up stuff. Me didn't know where he was going, but he's got a plan for me. But life wasn't perfect. We definitely had a lot of trials from that point on, and still my brother actually got in an accident 5 years prior, and he got paralyzed from it, and he just struggled from that moment on of just trying to live, really. He basically gave up on life at that point. So I was just really struggling with how can I help him? How can I fix him, and then my sister was living on the streets. I had no idea where she was. She was addicted to heroin. I didn't know if she was alive, if she was dead. She missed out on Avery's birth, first few years of her life, and just struggling through that, just knowing whether she's here or not. And it's just weird when you have that bond of your sibling. You have no idea what's going on in their life. And then I actually lost my brother 3 years ago to a car accident. 4 months after that, Katie's brother died of an overdose, so it was just like hit after hit after hit. But the beautiful thing is now that I have God on my side, I fall into his arms at that moment. I know that he's here to help me. He's here to guide me through it. And without that, I don't honestly know where I would be. And it's the beautiful thing is the things that God gave me in those moments to show me that, hey, Adam, I'm here with you. We're doing this together. Like my sister's now clean. She was on heroin for 9 years. She's got a beautiful baby girl. She hasn't found Jesus yet, but I'm continuing to pray that prayer, and I know he's got his hands on her, because how can you get clean from heroin after 9 years? Like God's got a purpose for her, and even through losing our brothers, the first time Katie and I came to Bridgepoint, my buddy, my Bubba, my best friend was teaching that Sunday. And that was the greatest gift from God after losing my brothers, and I always longed for a closeness with my brother, and he gave me that gift of a best friend and a brother here, and we do life together. Our relationship's built on Jesus, and it's just nothing I've ever experienced before. And just seeing those gifts from him is just, I got you, Adam. Everything's going to be okay.
That's awesome. I love that. And I love that in the midst of all of give it up for Adam. I love that in the midst of all of those things, a lot of people, when they experience difficulties, they run away from God. And you, the way you said it, I loved it. You fell back into his arms. I love that. I know there are people here today who are in the same spot today that you were several years ago. Maybe their spouse is on fire for Jesus, or maybe they're trying to figure out this whole faith thing. Maybe they've had kids and they're coming back trying to figure this whole thing out. What would your encouragement to them be?
So first of all, one of the biggest things I've struggled with is just feeling like I wasn't worthy of God's love. I did too much things to mess up. I didn't feel like I had a purpose or a calling. I didn't know what I should do, or I feel like I didn't know my Bible. I never read it right. There's always these doubts that we hold in our minds, and the truth is they're lies. It's never too late. I got saved when I was 25, and for a lot of people that can seem kind of late, but it took me walking in those moments and trusting God to get to that point when I was 25 to feel like yes, this is my time. I've got my answer. So it's never too late. Don't ever doubt it. You've never done anything that God won't accept us for. He's waiting for us in open arms and just waiting for the moment that we really pursue him and tap into it. And second, I would say just plug into community. The moment I got into the student ministry at the church, I just felt just an overwhelming sense of love and purpose, and I had a place in the church. I felt like people were there to support me and lift me up, and although I didn't know what it looked like to walk with God at the time, they helped me learn. They helped me see what that looks like.
That's so good. And I think that's where I think for me, that mindset shift of what church is, it's not an organization. It's not coming together, for an event. It's a family and it's community. And that's why at Bridgepoint, I'll do a little plug here. You said, put the ball on the tee for me. I got to take a shot here.
That was my plan.
We do life groups. I mean, we do small groups that meet all over the city. We have more people in small groups than we have on Sunday mornings. And that's something that we love because it's not about getting people in a room to hear a message, about getting people in a room together so that their lives can be changed. So, man, Adam, thank you so much for sharing your story. Would you guys give it up for him one more time? That's awesome. Up next, we have Miss Julia Geiger. So, for those who haven't had a chance to meet you, why don't you introduce yourself and talk about your family?
Yeah, so my name is Julia. And if you look at the screen, that super hunky guy is my husband of almost 5 years. And we are expecting our first child in 2 weeks. So I'm very grateful that he hung in there long enough so that I could be here this morning. And we've been going to Bridgepoint for about a year and a half.
That's awesome. Now, what I love about Julia's story is that I think it's so relatable because I think everybody here has probably experienced some kind of church pain, or I think the buzzword now is church hurt, and that's been your experience. And so would you just share with us your journey through that?
Absolutely. So I moved here from Colorado, and I got plugged into the church that my husband was attending. This was several years ago, and just, dove right in, got involved in the student ministry, loved the church. It was an awesome place to be. And then at about 2018, I started feeling like God was calling me towards teaching and towards public speaking and some of those things. And he was really lighting my heart on fire for it and getting me really excited about it. But those were not skills that I had ever exercised before, I hadn't had before. And so I was like, okay, I got to start looking for opportunities. How can I grow this? How can I get into this? So at the time, the student ministry that I was involved in, the leadership made kind of this blanket statement to us as a group of like, hey, we really want to see you grow in these things. And so if any of you are interested in teaching or public speaking, we would love to put you through essentially like a development program to get you on the track to do that. And then eventually you'll be teaching, in front of students. And I was like, perfect. This is literally exactly what I was looking for. This is so awesome. And so, so I started, I reached out to them and I was like, yeah, how do I do this? How do I get involved in this? And it actually ended up being about 6 months of me nagging them and badgering them and reaching out to them. And either it was kind of like oh yeah, we'll do that sometime, or they just wouldn't respond to my email. So finally I was like, okay, enough is enough. Like I need to know what's going on. So I just had a one-on-one conversation with the main leader of the students and basically was like, am I going about this wrong? Like, am I doing something wrong here? Like, let me know. Like, I really want to do this. I really want to grow in this. And his answer was basically, okay, here's the thing. Our leadership for the students is all men. And you as a woman, there's no way that we could put you through this development program in a way that would be appropriate. And that was the end of the conversation.
That's got to be so crushing to feel like your own gender disqualifies you or prohibits you from doing what you feel like God has called you to do. And what were some of the emotions you were processing through, and how did you handle all that?
Yeah, so I think it definitely did instill a lot of hurt in terms of male leadership. I felt like the enemy definitely just got right into that and took opportunity and took advantage of that and said, oh, okay, look, like you can't trust male leadership in the church. And but also, and more, what it did is it sent me through a lot of doubt, and it sent me through kind of a spiritually dark season where I was questioning, like, God, did I even hear from you? Like, do I even know what your voice sounds like? Like, am I just wrong here? If I were to pursue this, like, would I be sinning? And just kind of spiraling into that, like questioning my purpose, questioning what God had for me, and feeling like the will of God was now suddenly like this puzzle that had to be figured out. And it just was really hard for a while.
Yeah, I know that anytime we experience relational hurt, that's a wound, but especially when it comes from like spiritual authority or leadership. And I always say, like, if you're at Bridgepoint long enough, I'm going to let you down. I will disappoint you in one way or another. And if you're not sure about that, ask around. I'm sure. But I know that it's a weight that as spiritual leaders we carry, because that can have an impact on how we relate to God and even questioning His calling on our life. How did you get healing from that?
Yeah, so I went back home to visit Colorado shortly after that, and I remember I was coming back on the plane from Colorado. It's about a 3-hour flight, and it was an older plane, so it didn't have like the Delta Studio, so I couldn't watch TV, and it had no internet. So I was like, okay, well, I guess I'll read my Bible and pray. And
you have to be pretty desperate.
And so I was just kind of going through my Bible, and I felt like this was just being dug up in this kind of topic, and I started to get really frustrated with God, and just being like, God, like what do you want from me? Like what am I even doing here? Like I feel like I'm just struggling. And even just questioning, like, God, do you value women? Like, that is like the point that I had reached with him. And I just remember hearing him very clearly, I want you to go to Romans 16. And I was like, okay, random. So I open up Romans 16, and it's the part at the end where it's just a bunch of people's names. And I was like, God, where are you going with this? And the first line is, I commend to you, brothers and sisters, your sister Phoebe, a deacon. And a deacon is a church leader. And I remember just in that moment, I started sobbing and probably like terrifying my fellow plane passengers. But it spoke to me so clearly, like it was like exactly what I needed to hear from God in that moment to kind of set me on this journey of recovery. And it was like, oh God, like, yes, you do have value for women. And from there, I felt a call from him to go and explore the Gospels and just look at how did Jesus treat women and what were Jesus's interaction with women. And what I found was amazing. And it just healed so much of that hurt. Because I really had been in that place of questioning, like, God, what do you believe about this? What do you believe about me? And what I saw was, that Jesus did value women, that he empowered them, that he saw their story and he gave them a platform to share it. And I thought that was amazing. And I was able to use that to instill confidence in myself for, okay, God, like, I believe that this is what you want for me.
That's so good. And there's a couple things I love about what you just said, because first off, you are honest with God. Like, I think sometimes we think that God's ego is so fragile that he can't handle us being honest. But I love that you were honest, and in the midst of your hurt, God met you there. And you allowed that season of pain to push you closer to Jesus instead of away from him. And that brings healing. I think where a lot of people struggle, we can kind of get that, right? Like, okay, Jesus didn't hurt you, that church leader hurt you. And so a lot of people be like, all right, I'm cool with Jesus, but I'm not so sure about this church thing. But obviously for you, that's still a part of your story and your healing. So you talked about your spiritual healing. What about your healing in regards to being a part of a church family?
Yeah, so I actually did end up still serving at that church that I was a part of for about 1.5 years after that. And I just felt like that was what I was called to, was just to continually faithfully sow. And honestly, like, that was hard. Like, it was a hard season to be in when I felt this kind of distrust for my leadership. And then when my husband and I moved up north, we were like, okay, well, that's a really far drive, so let's start looking for a new church. And we had friends who invited us to Bridgepoint. And my first Sunday here, I remember just walking in, feeling nervous, feeling a little raw, feeling, hesitant. And I saw the video announcements come up for Growth Track, and I was really intrigued, but a thought popped into my head, like, oh, I bet women aren't allowed to go through that. And that's
they are, by the way. Yeah. We want you all in Growth Track.
And that'll just show you, like, that's the frame of mindset that I was in. I was in this really, like, I had let the enemy lie to me and basically tell me, like, oh, no, now, no matter where you go, you're not going to have a place to speak. But so that Sunday, someone approached me afterwards, and they were like, hey, you want to do Growth Track? And I was like, oh, cool, like, we can do this. All right. So I did. I went through Growth Track. And there ended up being kind of two situations that God used to just heal that part for me. So the first was a couple weeks after I finished Growth Track. Pastor Keith ended up approaching me and he invited me to join the communication team, which is what we do, the announcements on stage. And he just spoke so much life and so much encouragement to me. And it really was like, it didn't feel like he was like, oh, we're desperate for people. Like he was like, no, I want you on this team. And I felt really, really seen, and I felt really valued in that moment. And then the second thing was, we were having a communication meeting. We were practicing. We were doing some run-throughs. And at the beginning, Pastor Matt ended up just sharing a quick little thing where he's like, I just love that we have 2 men and 2 women on the communication team, because I love that, somebody could come in on a Sunday and they would see themselves represented up there on stage, and they would know, that they could do anything, that God could have anything for them. And I just, in that really authentic, pretty casual moment, I felt like, oh man, like I feel so valued here and I feel really seen here. And it was such a gift from God, that this place that I was in of feeling a lot of distrust towards male leadership, that God used to male leaders just being loving and just being faithful in what he had for them to speak into me and to come and heal some of those areas in my heart.
Yeah. I don't know everybody's story, but I guarantee you there are people here today and they've experienced that church hurt, and maybe they are feeling the same nervousness and emotion you felt as they are walking through that season, and they're not really sure what their next step should be. What would your encouragement to them be?
Yeah, so we have an enemy that wants to lie to us, and he wants to get us away from people. He wants to isolate us. He wants to get us to question our purpose. And he's going to do that however he can. And so I think being aware of that. There's this story I love in the Gospels of this woman who basically had bleeding for years, and that made her unclean and kind of an outcast from society. And there's this moment where she's in this crowd and she sees Jesus and she's heard about him. She's heard that he heals. And she thinks to herself, like, if I could just reach him, if I could just touch him, I know that I would be healed. And I love that is our God. Like, God can use tools and he can use people, but at the end of the day, our healing comes from one person, and that's Jesus Christ. And so I think if I have any encouragement to anyone, it's that seek your healing from Jesus, because he's the source of it all. He is our healer. And then the second piece I would say is, it is scary. It is scary to get back out there after you've been hurt, and it requires you to be vulnerable, and you could get hurt again. But I think that when we do let Jesus be the source of that healing for us, then, because the church, just like anywhere else, is made up of imperfect people, and people are going to mess up, whether that's leadership or just people within the church. And when we have Jesus as our source of healing and our source of security, that makes us have a little more grace for when people mess up and when people, do the wrong things, and we're able to just love a lot more freely and exist in that space a lot more freely.
That's so good. So good. Everybody give it up for Julia. Wasn't that awesome? I love that. All right, well, we're running short on time, so I'm going to pray for us, and we got one more. It's last but not least, Allie Finnegan. So, Allie, I know there's probably some people here I haven't had a chance to meet you, so why don't you introduce yourself and your family?
Hey, my name is Allie. I've been married to my husband, Brian, for a little over 5 years now. We have 2 beautiful daughters, Hadley, who is almost 2.5, and Cameron, who just turned 10 months yesterday. And we've been going to Bridgepoint for coming up on 2 years.
All right. Now, your story starts when you move up to Woodstock, looking for a house, you find out you're pregnant, and so what happens next?
So we were super excited, finally settling down in a house, and we didn't realize when we were looking that we were expecting our first little girl. And pretty early on in the pregnancy, when I got a routine ultrasound, they said, hey, your baby is looking a little bit small, and so just for precaution, we're going to send you to a high-risk specialist just to double-check everything. I mean, it should be fine. And so we went to the specialist, and it was about, the anatomy ultrasound. They have all this high-tech things that you can see everything amazingly, like a microscope. And the ultrasound tech was kind of zooming in on her head a lot. And I thought, well, I don't know. This is my first child. This must be normal. And then the doctor came in. He did the same thing. He kept going over her head. And then he said, I want to speak to you guys in my office, if that's okay. And my stomach sank. And I looked over at my husband, and I said, something is wrong. And he was like, no, don't assume. He's probably just giving us the results. Like, everything is fine. And so we went into his office, and he said, unfortunately, I see some bleeding in your baby's brain. And I don't know where it's from. They can't see enough, or he said it could be a brain tumor. It could be a multitude of things, and we're going to have to send you to get an MRI to double check what this is. And I think I made it to the elevator and then lost it. Was completely freaking out. We went to the MRI a few weeks later and found out that she had a stroke in utero. Don't know what it was caused by, and the cerebellum, which actually has balance and coordination, was eaten away a little bit on one side, and so we were told that 60% chance that your baby will be normal, and 40% chance that she will have extreme difficulties the rest of her life. And so again, crushed, devastated, had no idea what our baby's future was going to look like, and honestly was just angry. So angry at God. But then again, our doctor was pretty hopeful and was like, everything should be fine. Babies' brains are elastic. It's actually better for a baby to have a stroke than an adult because they can rewire their brains. It's incredible. And so we were super hopeful. The pregnancy went on, and then a day after we got home from the baby moon, actually went into labor unexpectedly at 33 weeks, which is, too early to have a baby, but went to Cherokee, Northside Cherokee, and they said, well, unfortunately, we're not going to be able to keep this baby in. I was having extremely high blood pressure, almost like seizure, where I was on so much medicine, and they ambulanced me over to Forsyth and Cumming, where there was a higher NICU level, and I ended up having her, a beautiful girl named Hadley. She was 3 pounds, 8 ounces, was barely breathing when she came out, but they were saying she was going to make it, and for the next almost 7 weeks, we went 45 minutes back and forth to go visit her. She had 1 million cords attached to her, a PICC line going through her heart, oxygen. And so early on, I started having extreme panic attacks. I've always struggled with anxiety, but this multitude, it was insane how much it multiplied it. And I would have a panic attack on the way to the hospital. I would have a panic attack when I would hold her because 3 nurses would have to get her out of the isolette for me to hold her. I only could hold her a certain amount of time a day. I would have a panic attack on the way home. And so I was so just in a moment where I should have leaned on my faith the most. I was pushing God away. I was angry at him for letting this happen. And I was relying on myself for strength and relying on my friends and family, which only got me really so far at that point.
So after 7 weeks, and then Hadley gets to come home, what kind of happens at that point?
So she came home on Mother's Day, which I think is incredible. That was the best Mother's Day present ever. And overall, she was healthy. She didn't come home on a feeding tube or oxygen, and we started therapy right away because of her stroke and being premature, which is like a double whammy. And I remember sitting in her nursery chair and just listening to a worship song and breaking down in tears because I finally had this baby girl in my arms after so many weeks coming home empty-handed. And just so incredibly grateful. But at the same time, I felt like a typical day with a newborn was kind of ripped away, that she was crying almost 80% of the day. She had therapies and doctor's appointments and insurance calls. And I really just wanted to go up to moms that I thought had it so much better than I did. And I wanted to just go shake them and say, like, you don't know how easy you have this. And I remember breaking down one time and just saying, like, God, I'm so angry at you, and finally just admitted it. And he said, like, Allie, I understand. I know you're angry, and I understand, like, I'm here for you. And little, that kind of was a breakthrough for me that I need to rely on God. But little did we know that, like, our story, was far from over there.
Yeah. So the doctors had told you that she's premature, but that in about 2 years, her development will catch her up to the correct milestones. And so, we're a little bit behind on the milestones, but she's going to get caught up, except you guys didn't feel like she was catching up. Is that right?
Yeah, so I was going to deliver our second child. And before then, they decided, hey, she's a little behind for being a preemie even, so let's do some genetic testing, which is actually really incredibly interesting, that they open up your entire DNA sequence and they look for anything missing or added, and they say, like, most of us actually have, a difference. And And so they got the results back, and I actually was hounding them for like weeks because it took forever, and I was just like I was like, I need to know. And they called me and was like, we have the results. We want to discuss with you over an appointment. And so I was like, they're not telling me over the phone. Something came back. And it was that like sinking feeling again, but I was delivering Cameron the next day, our youngest daughter, and I was like, I want to know. I think they were a little concerned that I was so pregnant and they were going to tell me this news, but they told us over telemedicine because of COVID, and she said, well, your baby has something called Williams syndrome. And Williams syndrome, if you're not familiar, is a deletion of 24 to 28 genes on chromosome number 7. And you would think that's a tiny, minuscule thing, but it causes so many different things, and including intellectual disability, developmental delays, a lot of actually issues with the heart, the heart, the kidneys, teeth. I mean, you name it, it's like something we have to watch. And so she was really positive about it and was like, Hadley is the same little girl before this call. Don't research anything for about 4 weeks, because she knew I was delivering the next day and she thought postpartum hormones. Like, don't research anything for about 4 weeks, and then, once you settle in, then, you can start looking. And I thought, okay. Right when we got off the call, of course, I took my phone out and Googled everything I could find. Because I was curious. I had never heard of this. And I looked at every article, every hashtag, every photo. And that obviously was a mistake. And I remember I knew nothing about this. And I remember one of the first articles I came upon, it was talking about Williams syndrome. And it compared people with Williams syndrome to the Shakespearean times court fools and elves, because they used to call it elfin syndrome because of the facial features. And I just remember being devastated and thinking that all the dreams I had for my little girl were gone. Would she ever get married? Would she have a job? Would she live with us the rest of her life? I didn't know. And it was devastating.
So as you guys are processing through all of that, what was your next step? Where did you guys turn as you're trying to discover more about God and his plan for Hadley?
So once the initial grief, I think God gave me such a good thing in actually giving birth, because it kept my mind off of the new diagnosis. But we honestly didn't know where to turn and didn't know what to do. We were thrown into this whole entire new world that we knew nothing about. And I actually remembered when I was a child, I had a neighbor about 2 or 3 doors down, and they had a son who was an adult, and he had disabilities. And I remember interacting with him, and back then I remember thinking, oh man, their parents, he still lives with them. He's 40, and they can't do anything. And he seems like he doesn't have a job, and to me it was like a burden or something to them, and I felt bad for the parents. And I was maybe 12, 13, and then right when she got diagnosed, that exact conversation came back to me, and I said, that's it. God is saying, gotcha. That's what you get for thinking that back then. That's what you get for being judgmental. And now I'm going to hand this, this is what you deserve. And so when we got the diagnosis, my husband and I, we know nothing. Really, disabilities is something we're uneducated on. And so we decided, hey, what does the Bible say about disabilities? And so we took a look and did some devotionals, and we found this story in the Bible about Jesus was with the disciples, and there was this man. He was born blind from birth, and the disciples looked at Jesus and said, hey, what did this man do, or what did his parents do to make him blind? And he said, oh, no, he didn't do anything. His parents didn't do anything. God made him blind so that the works of God would be displayed through him. And that was such a breakthrough moment for me, that I realized that it was nothing that I did, and it was nothing that Brian did or my parents did that to make her this way, to make her have this diagnosis, that we're actually incredibly honored that we get her and we are closer to the presence of God in our home, and that God can work through her.
That's so good. And if you ever met Hadley, she is awesome. So talk a little bit about how you've seen God's glory displayed through Hadley.
So Hadley is incredible, and I think we missed along the way, or I realized along the way, that God was with me the whole time. even when I was pushing him away. And I call it like God winks. Like, I remember I was at Tuesday morning one time with Hadley, and she had just gotten her glasses, which I think they're the cutest thing ever. But some lady came up to me in the line and said, "Hey, where did your daughter get her glasses? My son needs glasses." And I told her, and she said, "Yeah, he was a preemie. He needs glasses." And I said, "She was a preemie." And then she was like, "Yeah, I'm just disappointed." You know, we were talking. She said, "He's behind on his milestones." And I said, "Oh, she's behind on her milestones." And we were like connecting. And it was so simple. But I went back to my car and I honestly cried because I feel like the enemy, when you are going through something difficult, he makes you feel like you're alone and you're the only person. And I thought, oh my goodness, God brought this woman to me to say, "Hey, Allie, you're not alone. There's someone else going through this, and you need her. And actually, she needs you to know that, I'm still here and I'm there with you." And so she's wearing her little, in that picture, she's wearing a little Hadley's Hive shirt. But we have like a little community around, and just we've seen more like injustices in the world through her eyes, and knowing that there's such a long way to go. Like in the Bible as well, Jesus was eating with the Pharisees, and they invited all of the high and the mighty and the beautiful and the most prestigious, and Jesus said, no, go out and get the crippled, the lame, the blind, and bring them here. Like, you're missing the point. And it was counterculture back then, and it's crazy that it's still counterculture now. And he said, basically, I'm paraphrasing here, but like, when you treat those that cannot repay you with respect and love, like, you will be rewarded in heaven. And so I think we have such a long way to go in that, but I also think that God has given me traits that I realize are I can use for good with this. Like, I've always been outspoken and really into like right and wrong and blunt, which used to get me in trouble, so I've had to hone that in a little bit. But I don't think that's a mistake that God has given me a child with different needs, because I know that I can advocate for her and I can channel that energy to advocate for her, other kids around her. I don't even know what that looks like yet, but just raising awareness and just, yeah, she's incredible, and she's taught us so much.
Oh, that's awesome. And I know there's people here today that are in the midst of, kind of what you guys were. Maybe not that exact same situation, but that they're frustrated at God because he's allowed something to happen, whether it's some kind of diagnosis or some kind of relational distress or with their career. And what I think is so fascinating about all three of your stories is that you would have been justified. A lot of people would say, well, just like the story of Job, just curse God and die, like walk away. But all of you chose to pursue Jesus. And so if there's somebody in the midst of that right now, Allie, and they're struggling, they're wrestling, why, God, are you letting this happen? What would your encouragement to them be?
Well, it kind of reminds me of a time when I had Cameron, and she was a newborn. She's probably like 2 or 3 weeks old. And Hadley, at that point, was 18 months, but she wasn't very independent. She wasn't crawling yet. She wasn't feeding herself her bottle. So it was like having twins. And my mom was there to help me, and I was just like so frustrated, tired, exhausted. And I went to my mom. I said, "Oh, I didn't sign up for this." And she looked back at me and laughed and said, "What did you think you signed up for, Allie?" And I really feel like, looking back on that conversation, that's what we have a conversation with God, that when something we don't like happens or something goes wrong in our life, that we look at God and say, "God, I didn't sign up for this." And he says, "Well, what did you think you signed up for?" Because he doesn't promise us that life would be perfect, that we would have a white picket fence and a perfect family, but he says there will be trouble, but take heart, I have overcome the world. And so I think that just arming yourself with that scripture, and when the lies come in and the doubt comes in, that you can fight back with the truth.
That's so good. Oh, man, give it up for Allie. Wasn't that incredible? Yeah, we might all three of them did such a great job. We might do it again next week. I don't have to teach. I'm good. And that was awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for just sharing your story. And I know that all of us can relate to that in so many different ways. And so we're going to end our time together the same way we do every Sunday morning. And we're going to enter into a time of reflection and communion. So we have communion stations set up throughout the room. And you'll be happy to know we're back at real crackers. All right. No more wafers. But as you're taking the body and the blood of Jesus today, here's what I want you to focus on. Because every single person in this room has a story. And your story is different from mine, it's different from theirs, but there are aspects of their story that I think can speak to us. Whether like Adam, you didn't grow up with a strong spiritual foundation, you're seeking that out now. Or maybe like Julia, you've experienced some church hurt. Or maybe like Allie, you're frustrated because life's thrown you a curveball and you're trying to figure out how God is working through all of this. I don't know your story, but here's the amazing thing, God does. And if we'll be like these guys and we'll just lean into God in the midst of that pain, I think he has a word for us this morning. I think maybe it's a verse, maybe he's just saying, hey, I'm with you in the midst of whatever you're going through. But as you take the body and the blood of Jesus, no, he gave everything for you. He's not abandoned you. He's not trying to get you to figure this out on your own, but he's walking with you every step of the way. So I'm going to pray. Then as you feel led, you can have communion. God, we're just so thankful for Adam and Julia and Allie, and just thankful for their courage to share their stories. And I just pray that for each person in this room, that you would give us the boldness to share our stories of what you're doing in our lives. And I pray right now for people who are trying to find spiritual footing, people who are recovering from pain and hurt, people who are in the midst of a difficult season, that right now that they would just fall back in your arms, that you would cover them with your love. And that as they meet you through your body and blood, that you would just envelop them with your love. And in this moment, you would speak to us and make us more like you. It's in your name I pray. Amen.